to our December Washington Township Planning Commission meeting. As usual, and rightfully so, our first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. So if you don't mind standing, if you can, and facing the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. It's great to do that. And I think our next order of business, D3, is roll call.
Mr. Sacco?
Hello.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Bongiorno? Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Jaski?
Here.
Ms. Jacobson? Here. Mr. Chaplin?
Here.
Okay, very good. Before I move to the next item, let me all indicate that our dedicated secretary had foot surgery on Monday, and he is going to be recovering for a while. He had it on one of his soccer or football toes.
Ouch.
Yes, indeed. So he's here in spirit. There's no question about that. And I had talked with him today and discussed some of the things that Cassie and Kayla and Dana put together, and Mike and Chris, and that's going to be on our agenda. So he's on board with all that, and of course, a lot of detailed work there, and thank goodness we have the staff to do it. So just to let you know that our secretary, Benny Bongiorno, can't be here tonight, but he's probably watching. So he told me he would be. So he's here in spirit. All right, approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approval of the last minutes. Anybody? I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Support.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Correspondence there. Dana, anything?
No correspondence.
We never have any correspondence lately. What's going on?
Would you like me to write a letter?
No, don't, please.
Hey, if I may, going back to the agenda, do you think it'd be appropriate to add old business to switch 7 and 8 around to let the petitioner not have to sit through ordinance updates in public hearings?
If you want to amend the motion to approve the agenda to switch the order of the agenda.
I don't know if anybody, just,
I'd second that.
I mean,
Without objection.
I think that's
All right.
fair.
Okay.
I'll amend the motion to move item 8 to item 7 and 7 back to 8.
And Chairman Brick seconded that.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unless you gentlemen want to hear about the ordinance update.
Are you sure? All right, well, you're up to bat. Well, wait a minute, public comment
comment.
on non-agenda related items. Do we have anything, anyone here? Non-related agenda items? Doesn't look that way. Okay, let's move on.
Because John's up here.
Yeah.
You're not.
Oh, yeah. What a great observation.
Go sit over there so we
The
feel
rookie's
good.
he's at a different table tonight. Okay, and will be for a while. All right, so new business is actually old business, number 8. We moved on the agenda. Romeo Square Commercial Condo Project. Gonna have a presentation about 7 commercial condo units at 66011 Van Dyke Avenue. A lot of parcel numbers there. They're on the agenda. I don't want to put everyone to sleep. This area is located south of 31 Mile Road on the west side of Van Dyke. So anybody here from Romeo Square would like to? Yes, indeed. All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Charles Kennedy. I'm the attorney for Romeo Square Commercial Condominium.
Thank you.
We were here last month, and I think there was a broader presentation made. You received comments from your staff people. There were maybe a half dozen items or so that had to be followed up on. You tabled the matter at the previous meeting. We did make some adjustments to our plans, made an additional submission. Okay. Okay.
We can't hear up here.
Made
good.
adjustments to our plans.
Thank you.
Made some additional submissions. From the review letters I've seen, those revisions were reviewed by your staff, and I think there were favorable recommendations that came forward for approval. I think the only caveats that were left in were that, of course, this is just an approval of the units. It's not an approval to build any structures on the units. At such time as there are structures proposed, those would come forward for site plan approval and, complete review pursuant to your ordinances. The only other item that I think was in the staff notes was some addition of some trees along a sidewalk on Van Dyke that's going to be installed, and we're fully aware of those requirements, and we will properly comply with whatever the ordinance requirement is on that.
Okay, Charles, well, before our planning commissioners start firing questions at you and your colleague there, I would like to introduce our staff who worked on, summarizing your plan for us. And as always, they're about 95% of the work. They make us look great. To the left of me is Dana Birschbeck. I call her D3 now and then. Next to her is our civil engineer, Michael Kozak. And next to Michael is Cassie Meidel. And next to her is Kayla. And they're both community planners for us. Do a tremendous job. I don't need to say it over again. And next to myself here, to the left, filling in for Attorney Christine Anderson, is Attorney Robert Siebert, who visits with us now and then, but is usually with the Board of Trustees. So you'll probably have a lighter evening tonight than the Board of Trustees. Let's hope. He deserves it after the last fly over the, whatever.
You gonna move on?
I'm gonna move on. Oh, staff, any one of you, take a turn at it. You have anything you want to add to what you've written and put in front of us?
Mr. Chairman?
Hello? Yes,
Make a comment?
you may.
I'd like to make a request that I abstain from participation in this because I am an adjacent property owner to the west.
Well, Abby, you did that last meeting, so that's good that you reminded us. And with good cause, I'd like a motion, I will make the motion to recuse Abby Jacobson because of just reason, location, and trying to keep any kind of appearance out of the record. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Got a second from Barry. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Abby, thanks for reminding us about that. Okay, anything, who wants to lead off? Dana, do you have anything? Cassie, Kayla?
I'll just add one quick thing. I did send a revised review from Macomb County Public Works. The prior review that was received had a pretty extensive list of things that they were looking for. Yesterday, I received a revised review, and it seems that, they've satisfied a lot of the comments, pretty much all the comments at this time. So,
All right.
everyone received that copy, and I'll turn it over to Mike, and then go down the line.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I think the county is looking at this in a similar way that the applicant has just indicated, which this is the first step in the process. They're going to come back, obviously, with individual site plans for the units as the site gets built out. At that time, things like detention and where the actual utilities will be installed, all of those things will be handled during the unit build-outs. All of our comments from previous reviews have been satisfied at this point, so we recommend a few.
All right, Michael, thank you. That's important. Cassie?
Oh, boy, it's not going to work now.
It's alive.
Well, you're not supposed to touch it. Our comments from previous reviews have also been satisfied. As also indicated tonight, the two outstanding were, since the ordinance still has the requirement for unit details, building elevations, and floor plans, Clearly, these are not available at this point. It is overall condo approval, but they would be required at the time of development of each unit. And then also, ordinance would require frontage trees on unit 7.
Yes, indeed, your summary did mention specifically the trees, that's for sure.
I think they're, in their docs, they spoke to that as well as the future developers of each parcel or each unit would have to submit their own plans and are responsible with adhering to our ordinances anyway, so I think it covers those items.
Good, Barry. Kayla, how about yourself?
No additional comments?
Okay, very good. Robert, I know that Christine had submitted something.
She had two minor comments regarding the master deed about the detention. If there's a problem with detention, they want a provision in there which will indicate that if it becomes in state of disrepair, that the township can go on, bill them, and if they don't, it will become a lien on the property. It's a very common provision, and I'm certain they don't have any objection to that.
And that provision has been added.
Yeah, it's
So
very common.
The requests from the attorney that the provisions she requested were added since the last meeting.
Excellent, great, thank you.
And I just might mention with regard to the Macomb County issue, I think that was just a communication problem. We actually met with the county back in May and June several times to get the whole stormwater issue worked out. And we had actually a commitment in writing from them. But then I think when it went this fall, it got put over to somebody else. But that's why we were able to resolve it in just the course of 2 days, because we wrote back to the people we talked to. So I think we are on the same page with the county as far as the pond.
Was that through the Office of Public Works? Yes. Public Works Commissioner? Okay, very good. Thank you, Charles. Commissioners, you got any questions?
Just a couple. Being that I'm the new guy here, and I wasn't here for your last presentation, I did look through everything. I did have one question about the site itself. I noticed on the north side, there's a delineation for a sidewalk along the parcels at the north end that will connect with the current Culver's property and then lead out to a sidewalk on Van Dyke. I know that there's a possibility that there could be development of multifamily at the back of this property behind the existing Tractor Supply. I was wondering, is there any provision for sidewalk at the south end of the property? I didn't see anything. I know we've got a couple of restaurants at front, there's one across the road, and if we're putting residential back there, there's some foot traffic that we might see in the area. And on top of that, I was wondering if there's any provisions being looked at for pedestrian traffic across the parking lot for the people that eventually are, working in those buildings that are built to access some of the amenities in the area. I didn't see it, I was just wondering whether that was addressed.
So are you talking about the southern access drive just south of the Salvation Army?
Yeah, on the south side currently, where you come in next to the Arby's and lead.
Yeah, so we wanted to maintain all pedestrian traffic coming in that main access road where the signal is. So that's kind of where we're extending the sidewalk along that drive there, and then each individual unit would build that stretch of sidewalk as they come in to develop.
Right. My concern is that once that's developed, the people who are there, either patronizing or working in those units, that want to take, advantage of the amenities. I know there's a Taco Bell just south of there, there's the Arby's and another restaurant across the street. People who are outgoing, or if they do develop residential behind that, people that would want to walk to the front of the property. I don't know if you guys have considered.
Well, they would be able to take that sidewalk along that northern drive.
So you would expect everybody to go over to the northern end and then come down the front?
Yeah, along I think they're sending a 8-foot pathway along that frontage of Van Dyke there, that they'll be able to utilize that.
It's a good hope.
John, yeah, and just because the way this.
wondering.
No worries. The way this parcel's shaped as well, that Arby's piece carves out such that their property is basically just the drive aisle there,
Okay.
south of Arby's. So that would require an additional easement from Arby's and the construction of the sidewalk on their property to have a contiguous piece all the way along that south end. Not impossible, and maybe if you put, a significant amount of units back there, at some point it might make sense, but now you're dealing with trying to put a provision onto them that then is contingent on somebody else.
Hey, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong too, but if they did obviously, I don't know if there's I don't think there's any kind of crosswalk at that light now, but if there was ever going to be a crosswalk, it would be at that light as well.
To the north,
Even
yeah.
if they had to traverse to cross the road to go to Home Goods or the theater, they would
Right.
have to walk down the path that way either way, so it's 6 one way, half dozen the other to get from point A to point B.
I understand what we hope for.
Yeah.
As is the case with many traffic signals throughout the county, there are ramps to nowhere that were installed for future crosswalks, but there is a crosswalk ramp actually on the south side of that entrance right now at the traffic light.
You gotta
Which would
watch,
make sense, is where you want to move people in.
that crosswalk goes to nowhere right now.
Yeah.
That's not a good, that's a bad thing.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere.
I mean, you're gonna have a blind person.
I don't mean to laugh.
Into traffic and not
It's
be able to
everywhere.
get up the curb on the other side.
Yeah.
That should be a drive.
On the east side, it's
Yeah.
fully crosswalked and striped and all kinds of
Yeah,
good
I had
stuff.
roads,
On the west side, there's nothing.
I've had roads remove those because it is a danger to the blind.
They had federal dollars that were attached to, I believe, the signal
Yeah.
improvements that they made, and that was requiring them to
They
put
should
those ramps
remove
in.
those.
Don't disagree with you, Mr. Miller.
Very good, Barry.
And there'd be a sidewalk constructed there that would now connect to that, actually.
Okay.
That's the piece that we're talking about.
Right, perfect.
Right, which would also be addressed at the time of the
site
proposed
plans.
development of the
Yep.
site plan. So just
Fair
noting that
Give
this
another
isn't
swing at
the
it.
last time that would be discussed.
Yep, my next 47 questions will be, that's all I had.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Good point. Okay, anybody else? Pete, anything? You all right?
I'm good.
Ronnie, you all right? I have a question. Unit 6, quite a large chunk of this proposal. Can you tell us what you contemplate putting in that area, in behind the Salvation Army and Tractor Supply and all that? You got any idea what might go
I
there?
don't think there's a tenant or anything specified right now. I mean, we did contemplate some sort of multifamily because it
Okay.
frankly will work there from a
Yeah.
visibility standpoint, but there's no tenant, no slated tenant. We're really, just focused on getting these units created and then,
Right.
as they're able to be marketed and, find a tenant that actually sits.
It's a large piece, and I would have guessed that it would be multi-residential of some sort, of maybe even apartments. I don't know. I'm not trying to suggest anything, but it's quite large, and, I mean, it's a wise use of the space, I would think. So, yeah, there's a lot that go on there, and, very good. So that's my only question. I think our staff has done a great job in putting this together as far as what you all needed to do, especially with, after having our meeting a month ago. Your response was pretty quick and effective. And do you think you'll move on this project pretty quickly, or will it take time for these units to get, marketed and?
There's, on Unit 2, there's really been a proposal for this Clean Hub car wash, which has been kicking around. And I think they may have even had preliminary discussions with, your staff about the design. But that's, we have to see if, it's taken a while to hopefully get this condominium project approved. And if we can get that approved tonight, hopefully they'll move forward pretty quickly in their final analysis. So
It's a very visible spot.
favorably, there would be the sidewalks, the detention pond, and then, Clean Hub coming along quickly, spring, summer.
Okay, Michael, I can ask you, is water and sewer available along that strip?
Oh, yeah, and it's been extended, the sewer was extended back behind the building, right after we completed the trunk line out in front of the building. So the sites are all prepped for that. They have to do some internal extensions, but everything, they have easements in place. That's what this condo did as well.
Well, pretty much would have to. Folks wouldn't even be talking about a car wash if there wasn't water or sewer availability.
There was mention of the trees, the need to put some on lot, or Unit 7. Is that still something, I wasn't here at the last meeting. Was that something agreed upon, or is that, I know it was in the comments about having, there were 4 trees missing from the street frontage?
Yeah, so along Unit 7, which is the northernmost unit, north of the Culvers, whenever that gets developed, they will be required to plant what is it, 7 frontage trees across their Van Dyke frontage. So I think that note is just a clarification note that'll carry throughout the course of the coming years the project evolves.
For the minutes, 4.
4?
If you want to do
I'm not
7, if
committing
you're
to 7.
volunteering to do
4.
7, that sounds
Well,
great.
There's
I might not
already
even be
8.
doing that project, so
Yeah,
yeah.
you only needed 12,
Whatever the ordinance
11,
requirement is, yeah.
11.38 or whatever it was. So, yeah, you need 4 more, so, yeah, I mean, catch those on unit 7, and we should be good.
My understanding is every unit would have to propose a plan. You'd have to come in, and each one of these 7 units, you would come in and have us review it, of course. Is that your understanding?
That is correct.
Yeah, typical site plan approval process.
Okay. I notice also that you went from 8 lots to 7. Is there any reason why you dropped the one off?
Yeah, we had, you want,
It was insufficient size, and we needed more, insufficient size, and we needed more parking.
Excellent. Parking, the magic concept in business. Absolutely.
No variances on parking.
Okay, well,
Like that.
we appreciate that, and so do our residents. They love to park. That's important, and I'm glad that that's part of your answer. Doesn't always happen that way here. So, very good, thank you. Anything else, Commissioner?
Just one, Mr. Chairman, Dana, if I can ask, I was looking through the packet you sent out, and I was looking at the comments from Richard Amorino about the septic. Has that been addressed?
Can I answer for you? I'm
Yes,
so sorry.
go right ahead.
We had the same comment, and it's noted that septic field is actually for Arby's. There's an easement related to it, so it will remain, and it is noted on the plan. If for some reason that back unit ever gets developed, obviously they'll have to address that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be there, that detention area stays, I mean, that's.
It's
not-
a septic area.
Septic area.
Yes.
Okay, it's not going anywhere then, right?
Eventually it could, to redevelop that portion of the property, you would want to eliminate it and connect Arby's to the sewer, because there is a sewer.
Okay, there is a
main right there.
possibility one day it could
One day.
disappear. Okay, well, that's a big parcel, that's a big part of the, right downtown in that area, as far as the township goes, and right across the street from each other, right at that light. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of businesses. So, okay, anything else, commissioners, before somebody throws a motion up there?
I'll make the motion to approve the commercial condo submission, master deed bylaws, and Exhibit B documents for the Romeo Square commercial condo consisting of 7 commercial units, included in parcels 240411, 151009, 0014, and 020.
I'll support.
Okay, very good. Is there, I don't think there's anything to add to that motion. Anybody got anything they want to add to Barry's motion, seconded by Commissioner Thomas?
We'll see future site plans on it.
All right, very good. And Dana, we can take a roll on that.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Sacco?
Yes to approve.
Ms. Jacobson?
Abstain?
That's right. Mr. Jaski?
Yes.
Mr. Chaplin?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Romeo Commercial, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again one day.
Happy holidays, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're more than welcome to stick around for the ordinance update, too.
Sure, it's fun. We're gonna really have a good time.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the most exciting part of our agenda, and we've all been looking forward to this after the hard work our staff has put into it. And that's our second item. Well, it was moved from the agenda, and yours truly is looking for his agenda sheet. And Abby saved me. Thank you. Old business that's now new business. Well, it always was new. Zoning ordinance text amendments, and we're going to have our public hearing this evening on it. Non-residential condos, housing for the elderly, sports courts, third-party delivery services, swimming pools, residential condominium, Exhibit B document requirements. A lot of important things in the village area and throughout the township were taken up. And the staff put together some very interesting notes and updated us. with things that are quite relevant, especially in the village area, where land is kind of like disappearing. And it's an area where most of our population in the township resides, and it's not going to not see anything new come in there. There's probably going to be new businesses coming in, just like at the old Hampton House. There are going to be other businesses, and then what they've done with these ordinances, I think the staff did a terrific job, and I had the pleasure of working with them last week about all these written notes, and before we start throwing our questions out there, I think the authors of what is in front of us, Cassie and Kayla, maybe they could give us what they think is the highlight.
They're going to kick that over to me.
Oh,
And then they're going to take the ordinance text amendments
okay,
that are further on the agenda for discussion.
really
Since-
D3.
I think to clarify the agenda,
Yes.
I think you were mentioning, you were describing
So-
the proposed new
Yes.
discussion items.
Yes.
Our new business is the public hearings for the items that we discussed at a planning commission meeting.
Yes.
The last planning commission meeting.
Yes.
So
Yes.
congratulations on being one step ahead. We're going to start with the public hearing ones, and then
You know, I messed up the order of things. Sorry. My fault.
Just blame it on Barry.
I make a motion to open. Everybody else.
Okay. Motion for what?
Open the public hearing?
Oh, we're going to go for the public hearing right away, or do you want to speak?
Do you want me to go through a little bit of this, or do you want to?
Sure,
I think before the public hearing, I think it would be a good opportunity.
Okay.
Because the audience is so vast. I mean, I think, we don't want to confuse the audience. Go ahead, Dana. Give us a tip or two.
So I did email out, and I hope it was helpful, plus I like to color, just kind of showing the current zoning ordinance and then the proposed amendments, so you could kind of look at it side by side to see what particular sections we were actually referring to in the draft that was provided by Christine, which is in ordinance draft format. So just to summarize, these are ones that have been discussed and were sent to a public hearing by the Planning Commission. And that was to include new definitions that don't exist. One, housing for the elderly or senior citizen housing, and sports court, since we are having, that seems to be a huge demand in our single-family residential district for sports courts. Since COVID, we're receiving much more inquiries regarding it. And some of the placement and things, just, we needed to have a definition, and that made sense to do that at this time. So those definitions, were there any questions specific to the two definitions that are going to be added?
I have a question.
Yes.
What regulations in the zoning ordinance will impact third-party service providers? Things like DoorDash and the like. They don't own any land, what are you regulating?
So we're regulating that based on, third party, okay, companies that, and I forgot to highlight that one, I'm
Right,
sorry.
DoorDash, Uber Eats.
Yes,
Hubhopper,
companies-
et cetera.
Correct. That is gonna be in our off-street parking.
it's not regulating the provider, to clarify. It's regulating that if a business is offering third-party pickup services,
So if I'm
that they
the
should
restaurant
designate.
that they're picking up from.
Correct.
Got it, but once they leave that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Want to make
we
sure.
are not
Okay.
regulating third-party delivery services at
Okay,
all.
good, okay.
So
And sorry, I excluded that one. There's three definitions, so I apologize.
So the business is
The short-term.
responsible for being regulated. It's
Well, they're not
the
being regulated,
picker-upper.
they just have to provide adequate parking.
Yeah.
Oh,
But once the car goes to the pizza place and picks it up and they leave, you have no ability to regulate that, the drivers or anybody else that leave that
Right.
business.
Correct.
I just wanted to
Not
make sure
proposing.
that's right.
Yeah, there's been an increase in, obviously, the third-party delivery services for businesses. And again, it's just to make sure that, we're not ignoring that, because that does occupy parking, it does take up parking area. So that was the whole purpose behind it.
Anything else, Dean?
But they have to designate an area in the parking lot for pickup.
So ultimately, just say, Tropical Smoothie decides they want to have Uber Eats 2 spots assigned to that, I mean, it's not something we will be involved with, will it? Will they delineate that those are specific to those or to those services? I mean, or is it just something that they utilize as their own spaces in their site plan?
And really, it would be like at the time of site plan approval.
Yeah.
That if it's a pickup type facility, but they don't have a drive-through window, the issue is that if they are only meeting minimum parking requirements and don't have a clear other, like, it's not even loading and unloading.
Right.
It's just a
No, I just
pickup
wondered,
location.
policing it wise,
Yeah.
how that would go.
Yeah, we wouldn't
because
be
I mean,
regulating
We see
it.
it all the time in strip malls where,
Yeah.
this tenant will say, parking for urgent care, or parking for, whatever, and that's really not enforceable. It's more of a landlord-tenant issue more than anything.
And we're not proposing
Right,
regulating it either,
Good.
so.
Thanks, Cassie. D3, anything else?
Okay, so then the next would be revising our accessory building and structure. So accessory building and structure paragraph for detached accessory buildings to include pools. Because right now, we don't have that, detached, including swimming pools and sports courts. So it's going to pick up both. So right now, we don't have, in our ordinance, it doesn't state as far as setbacks or placement even for swimming pools. So that's another, obviously another thing. We're just trying to make it more clear. We've had a number of ZBA applicants that came in for pool locations and in the side yard and somewhere like side and almost in the front yard because of the irregular shaped lots. So we're just trying to make sure that we're capturing everything under accessory buildings and structures. So our ordinance will change from just saying accessory buildings, it'll say now accessory buildings and structures, so that'll kind of be the catch-all.
I had one question on the wording on that, where in letter A, it says, no accessory building or structure unless attached to the main building. Well, if it's attached to the main building, it is no longer a detached structure, correct? So, I mean, and there's really, if you gotta be 10 feet from the structure for a pool, it can't be attached to the main structure.
What about an indoor, outdoor pool? Do we allow those?
Well, what do we define as an attachment?
I mean,
You have a
I
pool with
just,
a patio that runs to the building. Is that-
Structurally attached.
Okay.
yeah, I
That
mean,
was a
if it's structurally
carryover, we
attached,
didn't,
and now it's no longer in
Yeah.
a detached accessory building.
Yeah,
that language was already there. If you'd like to propose removing it,
Strike
yeah,
I
strike
mean,
it.
Otherwise, it lends to confusion of somebody who's looking to build an attached garage.
so no accessory building or structure shall be located closer than 10 feet to a main building.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I thought of that with the sport court too. So if you pour the patio of the sport court up against the house, now it's attached. Now so you could get into that too. I mean, I don't know if you want to keep that distance from the home. I know the distance thing, I gotta believe, is more about the actual buildings than it is about the other things. But just doesn't, to me, that just clarifies it. Thank you.
You all right with it, Barry?
Yeah, I'm good with striking that little,
Okay.
So you're striking the phrase.
Unless
Attached to the main building.
yes.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, D3, anything else?
Then the off-street parking and loading, it gets into further detail with loading and unloading areas, including those for third-party delivery services. So that captures that from the new definition that we have for third-party delivery services in our off-street parking and loading requirements. Then we get into site condominium, and we are eliminating requirements will be repealed in the following. Planning Commission approved landscaping plan shall be recorded as part of the master deed drawings. One of the items that came up also with the commercial condo had to do with having the building elevations included and recorded as part of the master deed and Exhibit B. And especially when there's custom home, we have a lot of developments, especially just recently, that just were approved. Custom homes, they don't really have you know, samples of elevations that they can record at that time. There was one other change on page 3 for final condominium plan review. And we did remove the language for community development director and put planner, and then fire department and township department heads, and then eliminated and staff because that's everyone that reviews that was already mentioned prior to that. So that was one thing that was caught after this was sent out. And I did send that over to Christine, and she didn't, there wasn't an issue with changing that language so that it's consistent with those that are reviewing. Let's see, now adding the new section for non-residential condominiums and then the submission requirements. So again, in reviewing the prior applicant, it was difficult because all of our items that we were reviewing them were against the residential aspect of what we required to be recorded. So this is now creating an ordinance section under site condominiums for non-residential condominium applications with the submission requirements of everything that would be required at the time of application and review procedures.
Sounds like you've had enough. Are you finished?
I got to the last page. I was gonna ask if there were any questions or if anyone needed additional clarification on those, on the particular items that are in the public hearing for tonight.
Nothing yet. All right, let's have a public hearing. Need a motion.
Make a motion to open the public hearing?
Support.
Second motion,
Okay, we had a race for the second. I think it was a dead heat between John Chaplin and Abby Jacobson, so, all in favor?
aye.
All right, our public hearing for the Charter Township of Washington Planning Commission meeting tonight, zoning ordinance text amendments as eloquently detailed and laid out by Dana already, and duly published by our secretary, Ben Bongiorno, who is here in spirit only tonight, as he's recovering. The public would like to comment. There's the podium. Come on down.
We have public comments? If you have any comments related to the public hearing, now's the time to voice those. If it's not related to the actual public hearing, we do have, further on the agenda, we do have public comments. So you can speak at that time.
Okay, very good.
We can go back to it, Dana. Maybe after this hearing, we can, 'cause
Yeah.
we already did public comment on non-agenda.
Yeah, you're right, we
But-
did. Okay.
He just
Circle
missed
back.
it. We were skipping through pretty quick, and I can understand how he would have missed it.
He'll have a chance to speak, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
We'll finish this one up and get back. No problem.
Okay, very
All right.
good. How are we doing so far? Okay, is there any concerned, dedicated resident here this evening who would care to speak during our public hearing? Having none, I'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
All right, we get a second?
Support.
All right, we have a support. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing closed in our matter in the zoning ordinance text amendments. Now, Dana did a good intro. Commissioners, any comments from y'all? Well, maybe the staff would want to comment first. Cassie, Kayla, any of you did all the work. I mean, not to take away from you, Dana, but our community planners were hard at work. And, you know, you gotta admire this because there's a lot of detail and minutia and all the rest, and this stuff is, it's very important. And sometimes it can all run together. In my mind, it does sometimes. I don't know about our attorney here. Sometimes for him, it can too.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the ordinance text amendments with the minor change in subsection 1.33A striking unless attached to the main building, and recommend forwarding it to the township board for final consideration.
Support.
Okay, well, I think we heard enough in that motion. I wouldn't add anything else to it. So we can take a roll call there, Dana.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Sacco?
Yes?
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Jaski?
Yes.
Mr. Chaplin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, staff, for such great work. I really do mean that. One thing I want to comment, though, I like the pictures for the historical buildings. You chose 3 locations that are quite classic, and that's a good thing to add.
You're getting ahead of me.
Oh, okay, all right, Kayla, okay.
Dana, I'll get you the revised amendment.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, Kayla, go for it.
Well, did you want to let the gentleman,
Are we going to move to our man?
Can we revise the agenda to reopen the, public hearing, or public comment on non-agenda
Agenda
related
item? Well,
items?
why not? That's good. Make a
Revisit.
motion, Barry.
I'll make the motion to revisit, public comment on non-agenda items.
Support.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Podium,
Come on up.
name and serial number. No, name and address.
Social security number first?
No, the name and address.
Definitely not.
I just have a quick question. I live in Washington Township. I moved here about 3 years ago, down on 31 Mile Road, and try and look for some development opportunities. And I'm learning how the land subdivisions work and then land zoning requirements. And quick question would be, are the cul-de-sacs, like the streets that end, and you have like a lot there that connects to other lots, would that be something that's not, would neighbors complain if you try to make that as a pass-through or attach it to other lots or develop it like more commercially to like add condos, something like that? I mean, I don't know if it's a too general a question or something I should.
Honestly, I think it'd be something you would want to probably reach out to planning about off to the side.
Okay.
I'm sure Dana can get you in the right direction with how to go about that.
Perfect.
Honestly, if you engage with an engineering firm, because obviously if you're developing, you're going to need an engineering firm or somebody, or architect, somebody that can draw up a plan for the commission to review and for planning to move forward with a site plan. But usually if you engage with that professional, they'll get you down the right path with regard to the
I have
ordinance.
like an architect that I'm working with and
Yeah.
people, but just general question before I even went, further would,
Every
do I have to
site,
talk to the neighbors or talk to you guys? Is that something like that?
every
that people-
site's different, and every
So-
site presents different challenges, and that's why having that
So-
design professional
Okay.
is of the utmost importance for you to put the right plan forward for that property.
And then reach out Dana?
well, and if you had specific property in mind, we could let you know what the zoning is. We can, if you're looking at, lot splits, we can verify with assessing, if,
I have the lots in mind, but I don't want to share them.
that's fine. You're more than welcome if you want to stop back in during normal business hours at the township. Just stop at the first window when you walk in,
Perfect.
and you can start the conversation there, and I can at least guide you into what the zoning is, and
Okay, sounds great.
you can go from there.
Great. Sorry for disturbing. Thank you.
Oh, you're fine.
No, thank you for
Thank you.
Thanks for the participation. More than welcome.
Excited.
Okay. Well,
We have a new John.
There you go. Thank goodness. I was worried. When I got to public, I wanted to sneak out there for public comments. And
John used to attend all of our meetings before he got promoted.
Ran for office.
that's what it is, a promotion.
More than promoted, he was elected.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think we can move on to project update.
All righty.
Sir Michael. Oh,
Yes.
what
No,
did
no,
we
no,
for-
no, go ahead.
I don't know, wait a minute, Kayla, did you have something?
Coming up next.
Number 9.
Kayla, your number, okay, you don't have anything, Kayla?
Not yet.
Not yet, oh, all right, I didn't want to get in your way. Okay, Michael, go for it.
Gotcha, Bob. I'll be brief, as always. Projects under construction, Washington Romeo Medical Building there on the east side of Van Dyke, north of 30. Site is mass graded, and they're going to be getting utility work here shortly.
Finally.
Finally. It's an exciting one. ITC Crimson Phase 2, which was the road construction of Albert Drive. The road is in, that paving's complete. They have some sidewalk and restoration to do in the spring, but there is a road there now, which is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's been a long time coming.
Yep, looks great. And Project Marathon, the ZF expansion, on 26 Mile Road there, all the underground is basically in and getting punch list complete on those. Paving work's just about done. They obviously have a lot of building work to still go. And then just in engineering reviews currently, we have a variety of projects. Newbury South's almost approved and ready for construction. Washington 27 properties the same. Clifton Farms and Vernon Grove are in various states of review along with Emerald Creek. And Cantor Farms did get all their final permits and are good to go for construction. And Leo's Coney Island is getting very close as well.
Whoa.
So, lots of engineering reviews.
Nice. Oh, man. Okay, very good.
Mike, anything going on with the old Hampton House?
Yeah, they got their ZBA variances a
Yes.
week or so ago, so they do have a minor engineering submission that they'll need to put together, and obviously have to go through the building department for all the interior building improvements, but they're well on their way.
How about the land behind the, off of 26 and the former pharmacy? It's being developed?
Rite Aid? Oh, right behind the Rite Aid?
Yeah.
Newbury South.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, the vacant parcel that's there, that's Newbury South that I referenced. They are just waiting on water and sewer permits. They have approved engineering plans, so they're getting close as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Very good, good questions, Ronnie. Okay, project update, we went through a lot of stuff, Mike, thanks. Number 10, Township Board update. Okay, John Chaplin.
Relatively, quiet township board meeting, which was nice. A couple of things came up. There was a revision of the food truck ordinance. Bob was kind enough to rewrite it for us. And the long story short, we took out all the bureaucratic
I
overlay.
didn't do it on my own, they directed me to do it. Go ahead.
He just took a swing at it because he wanted to.
I had nothing to do, so I thought, you know what, I'd take a shot at the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So-
Township Board of Trustees directed me to gut it, and I did, okay? So, keep going.
So he gutted it. Long story short, yeah, we kept the safety components. There's still inspections for the truck with the fire department. Licensing went from 1 year to 3 years. And we took out all the need to go through building and bother them with all kinds of stuff and site plans for a food truck. So it's just, it's mainly a safety issue now.
Sure.
We ended up spending $30-some thousand for a mannequin for the fire department for advanced life support training. This thing's supposed to be the best mannequin you can buy, and for that number, it ought to be. Township IT committee met. They're switching to two-factor authentication in the township, which will make our systems more secure. We appointed a new board of review. They are appointed, and the last thing I had was there was a vote to unanimously reappoint Barry Miller
Oh, man.
to the planning commission for another term. So you are stuck, sir.
My condolences.
All right, Barry.
And so congratulations on another term. That's about it from the board.
Thank you, John. Very good. And you're having fun, right?
We're having a ball.
Okay, that's what we want to hear.
We're having so much fun, we should be 9 people instead of 7.
Oh, listen to this guy. Want to expand the court, huh?
Back to court.
Oh, okay. In a packet. All right, very good. Commission discussion. Who wants to jump in on this? Number 11. Looks
I'd like to start a little bit for number 11. So we have additional ordinance amendments. They're large packets, but these have been things that have really been in the works. Dana and I have been talking about them for some time. They were all on the checklist of ordinance amendments from over a year ago as well. So these have been these are not radical shifts and first time coming for things. I've been working with Dana on our action items for some time. And I asked Kayla Malden on my team to join. She has been working with me on the reviews, has studied the ordinance, and has extensive experience in writing ordinance language, and very knowledgeable of Michigan's requirements and ordinance requirements, and shifts in regulations in other states as well. So brings a wealth of knowledge, and we've been working together, as Chair Bob mentioned. We met last week and discussed these all together with Dana as well. So there's quite a few packets. We're going to start with tattoo specifically. So if you want to pull your tattoo packet.
Tattoos, right.
Which we should really call the personal services package.
Yes. Thanks, Cassie. And it's really nice to meet you all and to be here. Cassie didn't mention, but I am local to this area, so we bought in Romeo, so very close, and a lot of these projects I drive by every day on my way home. So it's really nice to be able to work with you on different veins. So starting with the personal services packet, this first amendment that we're bringing forward for discussion is looking at some outdated language that was in the zoning ordinance that put tattoo parlors and massage parlors in with adult businesses, which are regulated quite extensively. There aren't a whole lot of opportunities, as you may imagine, to develop adult businesses within the township. So we wanted to bring these into a category that was already named called personal care services, which includes beauty shops, hair salons, piercing establishments, permanent makeup, that type of thing. However, as we were going about this, we realized that personal care services hadn't been defined in your ordinance, even though it was listed as a permitted use in several zoning districts. So in order to kind of accommodate both things, right, define personal care services and bring tattoos and massage establishments out of the adult businesses, we created this new definition for personal care services, and these are for recurring beauty and personal care upkeep services, carrying the required state licenses. So these are your licensed massage therapy businesses, your licensed tattoo and piercing establishments, along, again, with your hair salons, beauty shops, that type of thing. So the definition is brand new, but we're not proposing any use changes at this time. So personal care services were already allowed in several zones, including the local commercial, general commercial, and V1 village center. The only thing that we're striking from those use lists are the such as beauty shops and tanning salons, which is just extra language that we don't need now that we have a definition for personal care services.
Makes sense.
Are there any questions on these amendments?
It's quite detailed, Gail. I appreciate somebody like yourself who's worked on this in other areas and jurisdictions, that you have a real connection to what's relevant. And it's going to be relevant to, say, like the Hampton House developments, what goes in there. We have no idea. They have opportunity to install 6 to 9, I think, businesses, and any one of them listed here could go in there. So it's good they have a roadmap, at least to follow, as well as ourselves. So I'm glad you updated the personal care services, because that kind of like covers what is possible to happen in the, especially the village district.
And one quick comment, because I see a question coming. There are some uses in the village center that are redlined, and those we'll talk about when we get to the village center packet. We were just trying to keep the language consistent across your packets, so that we weren't confusing what was going to be allowed and not.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I just had a question on the definition for personal care services. Where did that come from? Is it something you generated, or was that borrowed and conglomerated, or?
Yeah, so this is generated using a few different definitions and, language that you already had, including or lumping tanning salons, beauty salons together. So we brought that in. We looked at some other ordinances, which are listed at the end of this packet as well. And so this is kind of a blending of different best practices.
Okay.
I like the wording in there, but are not limited to. Gave us kind of like a parameter that we may have to experience here, request down the road, so.
Well, it allows the entrepreneurship of new but very similar and related businesses, or someone's ability to combine.
Yes.
So maybe you don't then have to change the ordinance again, in a few years.
Like that flexibility.
Yeah.
How about you, Robert? Go for that flexibility?
Definitions are important.
Yes, they are. Okay. Kayla, anything else?
That's it on that one, and again, these are just for discussion right now, so we would bring them back at a later date for a public hearing.
Okay, great. It's a great start.
All right, it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Moving on, I think as we go through the packets, each one's a little more exciting, so hopefully we keep
Exciting counts.
up.
All right, so the next packet I want to look at is the wetland standards and the environmental provisions. So this one has been brought forward and had been flagged by Dana and Cassie because you obviously are experiencing a lot of development out here in Washington Township. A lot of the land that's being developed, it is affected by wetlands, drains, irrigation ditches. The language around this has existed in your ordinance since before the state, at least that's our understanding, before the state was even regulating wetlands. So it's not super clear. It doesn't talk about how your local ordinance kind of interacts with the way that other agencies are regulating these items. So we really wanted to improve clarity for applicants and for your planning staff as they're doing plan review. And we wanted to specify what type of wetlands have to be preserved on a site, whether the 25-foot buffer around different wetlands and water courses is required. And then we were also mindful of your master plan, which does include clear language about preserving wetlands and important woodlands, and considering ordinances to protect wetlands non-regulated by Eagle. So a few things here. We're proposing a few new definitions so that there's less ambiguity when we're talking about these different terms. The first is water course. That's language that was used in your standards but hadn't been defined. And again, this is coming from different ordinances that we've looked at and general definitions of water course. So not reinventing the wheel, but kind of blending together the best practices that are out there. So water courses, including naturally occurring or man-made drainage ways, detention basins, waterways that are continuously or periodically holding moving water. They have definite banks, a bed, and visible evidence of the occurrence of water. Water courses can include drains. Both county drain and a non-county drain are regulated underneath. It can also include irrigation ditches. So sometimes that's just a farmer's ditch that isn't intended for any stormwater purposes, but it's delivering water to irrigate crops or even irrigating forest land. Any questions before I move on those definitions?
Very good.
Okay. All right. So we did make some changes to the actual standards. The first is you'll see that we moved the provision requiring the preservation of wetlands and water courses up to the front. Previously, the way that this ordinance had been structured, you had your buffer requirements up front, and it wasn't clear. You know, you kind of had to get past all that buffer language to get to the part that actually requires the developer to preserve these wetlands and other features. Again, we moved that up front for clarity. And we specified that not all wetlands and water courses have to be preserved as open space. The ones that must be preserved are your lakes, ponds, streams, creeks that are naturally occurring, regulated drains, so county regulated drains, and then state or county regulated wetlands. So you don't have to preserve the irrigation ditch, you don't have to preserve a private drain. However, we then go on to amend the language underneath to say if you do choose to preserve those things on the site, so if you're leaving that irrigation ditch, you're leaving that drain, you have to provide that 25-foot buffer. So again, clarifying that if the developer chooses to mitigate the drain or irrigation ditch that's not regulated by a county or state agency, they can do so. But if they're going to leave it on the plan, they need to provide that 25-foot buffer for stormwater purposes to reduce flooding and risk to homeowners on the site. Any questions on that language?
That's kind of like what we've been pursuing and enforcing up until now, right?
It hasn't been continuously enforced, and I think that's the space where there's like the need for clarity, is you can remember someone said, like, oh, it's just a farmer's ditch, like, I didn't make it, I'm just not gonna do anything about it, it's here, which was fine, but then there wasn't clear language to say, well, if you're keeping it, then you have to have the 25-foot buffer, and it can't be counted as part of the lot. So I think that's why we're bringing these forth, is just it wasn't consistently enforced over years, and in part because it's not really relevant to every water course, right? And so that's where we're just saying you can't double dip. They can't say that they're keeping it and also not not going to provide the buffer or to count it
I
as part
think
of the lot.
specifying the farmer's ditch is important, because when I hear the word wetlands and I envision wetlands, I don't think of a ditch. But there are ditches, farmer's ditches, that are considered wetlands. So I think it's good that we specify.
And if they're regulated or not. So the ordinance had language that said, and other flagged wetlands, but that's not specific enough about what it is. Because to us, that meant if you're putting it on your site plan, you're flagging it, so.
You know what I didn't understand is item 3, where lake shorelines. I didn't understand that, about the impervious surface needing to be 50%.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up. So we had a water engineer specialist with our company kind of raise this issue when I was vetting some of these wetland provisions with him. And he mentioned that this language is really confusing. We think what it's intending to say is that within 100 feet of that shoreline, only 50% of the site can be impervious surface. So you don't want to pave all of that land against the shoreline, right? Because then your runoff's going to run into the lake. It creates water quality issues and potentially flooding if it's significant enough. But right, the way it's worded, the use of the word depth is really confusing. So that is something that.
That was the depth of the lake. Yeah,
It's a pretty deep lake.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty deep inland lake.
Yes, most inland lakes in Michigan are not 100 feet in depth.
So the shorelines of lakes to a distance of
Yeah.
100
Yeah.
from the shoreline.
So if we bring this forward for public hearing, we can make that change as well.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Yeah.
Good question, Peter.
And then the last provision I just wanted to mention, it's 2C here, just says if the terms of an applicable easement conflict with any of the standards in this section, the more restrictive shall apply. And again, that's just in recognition that there are other agencies that are regulating wetlands and water courses, and we don't want to overstep any of their controls if they're more restrictive. Questions on wetlands, water courses?
Important issue.
All right. Let's move on then to the village district, the V1 district design standards. All right, so the purpose of these amendments is really to eliminate the need for applicants and staff to reference a separate village ordinance design guideline document. So we want to move those standards from your design guidelines into the zoning ordinance just for clarity. It also helps us actually define what's going to be required versus encouraged, because those guidelines sometimes use shall, sometimes use should, and that just leads to issues with people picking and choosing what they want to enforce. And then we also want to bring alignment with your recently adopted master plan that you've spent a couple years on. And so making sure that anything that's included in that plan, we can kind of work in where it's applicable here. So the first thing here is that we did revise your intent statement for the village district just to clarify what you're really envisioning for this space. So rather than focusing solely on a couple uses that are allowed, we tried to be really robust in describing what you're hoping to achieve, which is that vibrancy, that mix of uses, and also that really unique village character that only Washington Township has in this space, right? This is something unique to you, so what can we do to really protect that and make it clear that that's what this ordinance is trying to achieve?
You're warming our hearts.
All right. So we do recommend a couple use changes. None of these that we are suggesting in the permitted uses are new uses to this district. However, we're moving a few over from the special land uses to permitted. So the first we're suggesting is that residential uses located above a non-residential use building or structure, so essentially a mixed-use building, be moved into permitted uses. Again, if what you're trying to achieve is really that vibrancy in a district, people being in the space during all hours of the day, we strongly recommend that you allow for those residential uses by right. The second is...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would that have, with regard to like senior housing above that, would that be residential? Because obviously senior housing is residential. And I know we're addressing some of the parking issues we would have with that because of the reduced parking and and whatnot. Would that have any impact on that, adding that in, not going through a special land use process, as opposed to just being a permissible use?
So it would still be subject to all the same zoning standards, parking standards. It wouldn't change those items. The only thing that really changes is that it wouldn't come to the planning commission for a public hearing, essentially. So with a permitted use, it's just the standard site plan approval. There's less discretion involved.
Just to clarify, the senior housing though, someone, if they're not designing something that is intended for, because we just approved amending that definition, if it's not intended for active adults, housing for the elderly or active adults, we now clarified that it is multifamily housing. So yes, it would be allowed a permitted use, but it would still be held to the standards. And you wouldn't be able to say, oh, it's housing for the elderly above multifamily, or above a commercial use, a non-residential use.
If that building doesn't have an elevator, which likely
Correct.
it wouldn't,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's a key indicator. It's probably not gonna fit that definition.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The elevator's not always the item, because in multi-story, you could get into elevator provisions regardless, but, I'm just trying to think of how, I just don't want to end up, we have one that tried to go in that we denied, so I just want to be sure that we're not opening ourselves up for a resubmittal based on this for that same building, because
So if they,
it was turned down pretty.
yeah, if someone was proposing a non-residential building, it would have to be one of the other uses that's permitted in V1. And then they could propose
I mean, that building
residential
didn't- didn't
uses
have
above
any
it, but,
amenities really,
Yeah.
per se. It was more of it wouldn't meet the elderly housing for the aged, I would say. It was more of an apartment type setting. If the parking would have been tough. I just don't want to get into a issue with that.
well, this has not gone through Chris and Bob's review yet, so that's the next step, and we'll flag that they should look at that closely.
That would be my only concern.
It's a good concern.
So the next one on this list is outdoor cafes and seating areas. You all recently amended standards associated, or recommended amendment of standards associated with outdoor seating and cafes. Because those standards are in place, there's really not a reason to make them go through the special land use. Again, this can go through the permitted use process. They'd have to comply with all of those standards that are already identified in your code. And this kind of encourages developers, right? What you want to see in this district is that outdoor seating, that cafe space. So it shows that, it demonstrates that by moving it into your permitted uses.
It sure is a trend.
Yeah, it does make it a lot easier for the restaurants to, not have to go through this big process. They're fighting it hard enough. And that's why, like with the brick and mortar restaurants, why I believe the municipalities really need to support them as opposed to the food trucks. And if, they're the ones paying the taxes, and the food trucks, what do they just pay for a permit?
You're right.
And taking away the business from the brick and mortar. Just my opinion, I used to be a restaurant guy, so. But,
So was I.
consideration. Okay, I'm off the soapbox now.
No,
And furthermore,
it's very
That's a
good.
good point, though.
Yeah,
It is true.
yeah, it's true.
Some of us pay taxes year in,
Yeah,
year out.
sure.
yeah, you're fighting it out, you're fighting all the regulations.
Yeah, the brick and mortar normally would stay. The food truck could go anywhere.
Yeah, we run into that all the time in the community I work, where I pulled up and had a food truck parked in the gas station parking lot underneath the canopy, right next to the pumps. And I'm sitting
Yeah.
there looking at propane tanks
Oh, my
on the back bumper of this thing right next to
yeah.
the gas tanks. And the new fire codes that will come out, the 2021 International Fire Code addresses food trucks, and I believe 24 goes a little further with it. Each municipality can adopt their own fire code, depending on the year they want to pursue, but
Barry, is that state or federal?
it's the international fire code. You have the right as a municipality to adopt that. The building code does not automatically adopt the fire code. The fire code has to be adopted separately. So your fire chief usually would get with Bob to add that in. I'm sure they've already done that. I don't know which one they're under currently, but the 2021 does address food trucks in it specifically. Finally, that one, and then 24 actually gets into the lithium, the battery storage and stuff like that we're coming up with, because Michigan as a whole is so far behind on the building codes. I do have an understanding, I got word yesterday that the Michigan Building Code and rehabilitation codes will be adopted in 120 days, not the residential yet. So we're actually gonna move forward to 2021, 3 years ago. Coming up shortly, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so sounds like no concerns right now with the outdoor cafes being moved to permitted. So the third one there is the zero lot line development. So this is currently allowed as a special land use. We propose moving it to the permitted use because again, it's the building form that you desire in your village center and you already have standards articulated that define what that zero lot line development includes and what it has to follow. Any questions on those? Okay. So under special land uses, you'll see that those three are striked out in red. And then we are suggesting your 3-story buildings not to exceed 40 feet. Currently a special land use. We are proposing that you specify that those are for an increase in height on buildings located on the interior of the lot. And we're suggesting that buildings located on the corner, or parts of buildings located on the corner, be allowed 3 stories up to 40 feet by right. And that's to encourage that traditional downtown or village center pattern where you have the height on the corners versus in the interior. So just a few things with that. Bob, during our conversation last week, brought up a really great point that he was nervous about developers potentially buying up a whole block and saying by right they would be allowed to develop everything to the 3 stories because they have the corners. So we did add some language in here suggesting that if a building has 2 corners, they would only be allowed to develop the corners taller if the interior has that height differentiation. So they have to show the height difference in order to get that height on the corners.
So if you're a corner lot, 3-story buildings not to exceed 40 would be permitted as of right?
Yes. Currently, it's a conditional.
I know, I get it, I wrote the brief, I know what it says, I'm just trying to figure out what this means. Okay.
Okay with it, Bob?
I don't need to be okay with it, I just want to understand what it means, that's all. That's all.
That's comforting.
Well, no, but I mean, I don't want to talk about the matter that's pending now before the court, but this was an issue that I spent a lot of time with. And I want to make sure that this is saying is that if I'm in the village district and I have a 3-story building, I can go up to 40 feet, and if it's on the corner, it's as of right.
Correct. Yes. So this is where Van Dyke intersects another street. And again, if the building is located on 2 corners, there must be a height variation between the corner and interior of the building. Any questions, thoughts on that one right now? Okay. All right. So the next one, you'll see the parking standards are crossed out here. That's because we're moving the parking standards throughout your zoning ordinance into one section, your off-street parking and loading. So you can ignore that for now because that'll be the next packet.
With the special land use standards, going back to nursing homes, memory care type facilities or any of that, should that be listed in I don't know how we go about, we can't really say senior apartments, because senior apartments that are people coming and going and using them aren't really homes for the aged, where they have amenities. Could that be, is that something that is allowable in the village district at all anymore, or no?
No, that is a good point. We could allow housing for the aged, like elderly housing, in the V1 district. It is
But-
currently not.
right now it is not an allowable use.
Correct.
Okay, so the one before us is not a home for the aged, that is actually just senior.
It would be multifamily, not even senior. It would be multifamily.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess just leave it as it is,
I mean, when you think of, just to challenge the thinking of housing for the elderly or senior housing, like, I mean, a lot are still very mobile with walkers and other things. If you imagine,
Yeah.
just think your village district, the intent is to be more walkable. The intent is to create that.
I'm not trying
It
to
doesn't
say, I
mean
mean,
it's
first
the
of all,
highest and best.
55 and older
Yeah.
is 2 years away from me, so I
No,
mean,
no, but I
55
mean,
is not that
housing
old,
for the
I hope.
elderly, by your definition, is like a regulated, like a state licensed facility.
Correct, I know, but the problem with the state licensed facilities is the state's handing out waivers like water. And they will register them. That's a whole nother issue that the state is doing. They're giving out waivers and they're giving out exceptions to certain things with the homes for the aged to allow people that shouldn't be in these buildings into buildings that aren't built properly. So I just worry that you allow senior housing in and then your fire marshal's gonna have a nightmare on his hands of going up to third floors with no elevators than trying to get people out of buildings that can't get in and out of buildings. So that concerns me, obviously from the fire and building standpoint of things, but when you mandate that they're above businesses and then not have elevators and things like that, which we can't regulate that, but I don't know where we put that.
Yeah.
You know, so, food for thought.
I imagine a very walkable, friendly, everybody's out walking with all abilities in your village district. I know that that's not necessarily.
That's what we want.
Right. How things would be constructed, so, okay.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on to D, architectural requirements. The first statement here is currently in your ordinance, and we struck that out. So that's because we're going to refer instead to your appearance standards for multifamily and non-residential buildings. And that's what requires the 90% brick throughout Washington Township. We did pull over from the guidelines the materials and colors. So I know this is one that Bob had a question on and we can discuss, but multifamily residential buildings are subject to the appearance requirements defined in 5.2. And then it says colors used shall be dark green, maroon, dark reds, browns, and other colors complementary to existing buildings within the village district. Again, this is coming right from your guidelines and for the most part has been complied with throughout the village district. So we proposed bringing it over as is, but if that's something that the planning commission would want to recommend a change to, we're definitely open to that discussion too. Okay,
Where's that, what you just read?
that's on page 5, towards the bottom.
Is it the colors that are?
Materials and colors.
Use any color in our township logo.
So if I'm a developer and I want to come in and put in multifamily, I have to meet those color schemes?
Yes.
But that's
And that's-
currently in.
Right.
Well, the fact that it's currently there doesn't necessarily make it any better. It's just-
Yeah.
I don't know.
I only raise it because there's another community I represent, and at the planning commission, we spend every meeting going, oh, they have a requirement of bricks are better. And the question always is, what's better? And because of all the new, and Barry, you know this and I don't, but all the different materials that are coming out, this hardy board and this other stuff that's coming out, you know, they keep changing them. And now it's being looked at as, well, what's better than brick? And I'm just looking at these, so, you know, I'm looking at it as a lawyer. What is the governmental interest in telling a developer that the building's gotta be green?
Yeah.
Blue or brown?
I agree with that. I have a hard time.
And I'm choking a little bit on that requirement. Particularly if it's a land use, say, of a chain, where they come in and they've got their particular,
Yeah.
the way it's supposed to look. We ran into this in another community where they put a Cabela's in. They said bricks are better. Cabela's said, we don't do brick. We do stone and we do wood. We want to have that
We do
log
heavy
cabin
timber.
look. Hey, we don't, Cabela's are made out of, you see them up north, you see them down here, and they all look the same. This is our standard. And if that municipality would have said, you either put a brick or you're not gonna put a Cabela's, don't move. Cabela's would have said, you know what? We're going over to Shelby, we're going over to Clinton, we're going over wherever else.
But yet you go to Sedona, Arizona, and you don't see the McDonald's with their architectural design. You see it the way the community wants it. And
Well,
I think that's a nice look.
Well, but remember, you're government, and the fact that you like it a certain way doesn't mean that you can just arbitrarily.
Then how can other communities do it? I've just seen many communities, that way.
I've heard that before, and the fact that, we tell somebody you can't do that.
They haven't been
Well, so-and-so does it. Yeah, they do it until somebody files a lawsuit, and they get challenged, and some judge throws it out the window.
Well, that's your job,
And
Bob.
I understand that, but that's
trying to cut that.
Years and years and years ago, when I was a young lawyer, I was in a community where I was on the dark side, and I was representing a developer going into a community, and they had one of these tree ordinances, which says you gotta have so many trees, and the calipers, I think is that a caliper? The round thing, it's gotta be so many, and it's gotta be so tall, and you can't take down, they said, it's our trees, we're gonna remove our own trees. They said, no, you can't do that. So we sued them. And the attorney wouldn't give in on it, the municipal attorney wouldn't give in on it, until the circuit court judge said, you know what? That ordinance is useless. So what you can either do is let the developer go in and take down his own trees, or we're gonna strike it down. So we settled the case, and that ordinance is probably still in effect. All I'm saying is, if you had a developer come in that was a national chain, that wasn't blue or green or maroon or one of these colors, and said, this is our identity. Yeah. I'm just wondering what the governmental interest is, that's all.
We run into that already.
And
Well,
that's,
with Ford,
and that's
the
why we're
dealer.
bringing it for discussion too,
dealt with
because
it at the Ford
it's part of
dealership.
our design guidelines. And that's, if we're incorporating those design guidelines into the ordinance, we want to make it clear.
For instance, what if I wanted to put in, well, of course, this is a multifamily, but if I wanted to bring in this was a commercial requirement.
Gray and black.
I want to put in a White Castle. They're white. Okay? You say you can't put- you
No,
can't
they're
put
gonna be
it-
a green castle here,
It's gonna be a
buddy.
green castle in Washington
Maroon
Township.
castle.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get it, so. Yeah.
And that's why we're taking these standards from our guidelines to incorporate, and that's why this is the time to discuss that, Our appearance standards are what we want to make sure that we're
Right.
maintaining, but is the color aspect of it something we want to continue to have as part of the village district, or do we want to, still go with those appearance standards that we have for the 90-10 and let them be creative with the color scheme of brick and 10% other material?
I mean, in the village district, you do have, you try to keep it as neutral as you can to some extent and let the signage be the signage. I mean, that's your identity, and your businesses in a village district is your sign. And, because they're not really, the idea of the village is, I mean, you look at Rochester Hills, you drive up and down Rochester Road there, and the buildings are all old style, like Romeo is. I mean, the tall buildings, the brick, and then the sign is their identity.
And I don't think you have to answer this today,
Right.
honestly. This is a great, we kept it in there.
Yeah.
The discussion is part of it, but I would say if you took time over the next month, look at the village
That's a tough one.
district, drive around to some others, and consider if this is something.
This may never come up. Somebody may never challenge it. I just, because when I sit in court and some judge says, Mr. Siebert, what is the purpose of this provision? And, you have to articulate it. You don't, you're not in the courtroom when the judge says that, and sometimes you look at these standards, and you say, well, that's a really good question, Judge. Let me think on that for a minute, So it just, again, it may never get challenged, and developers may be happy to do it. I just wondered what the reason for it was, that's all.
I did add at the back of this ordinance, if it's helpful in the next month, just some pictures of different village districts that you could use for reference. There's also links if you have the digital copy of this, or we can even email them out to get to these ordinances. Just to take a look, and if it helps you at all as you're thinking about how you want to regulate the village districts, then they're there for you. So moving on, building entrances, windows, and fenestration, all of this just comes over from your design guidelines, so not a lot of change there. This is all the stuff like architectural elements, making sure that there's transparency on the building, and that's, again, for first floor activation. It's also, a lot of communities see it as a safety measure. You can see in and out of buildings and have that feeling of comfort on the street. Streetscape amenities, there were some kind of vague requirements for streetscape amenities in the guidelines. What we did bring over was the requirement for benches, because that's been held up, and the developments that have come in along Van Dyke here have been required to have that bench in front of the building. For everything else, we put it in as encouraged, so courtyards, patios, other spaces where congregation can occur. Just writing in your ordinance that it's encouraged. If they do provide it, then there's certain standards that they have to follow. Okay. Lighting, these all just come from the design guidelines, and it also, we clarified that they also have to follow the standards in 515, which is your lighting standards for the rest of the township. All right, going over to page 8. So there were some provisions in the drive-through facilities section that related specifically to the V1 district. The changes that we're making here are that we are, again, just clarifying that any drive-through in the village district has to meet all your other drive-through requirements as well. That wasn't currently written in the ordinance, even though that's the way it's been enforced, so we just want to make that clear. So they have to meet the drive-through requirements, same as the GC and O1 districts, but then they also have these additional provisions just for the village district. Again, designed in a manner that minimizes visibility. We added clarification that stacking lanes must be clearly delineated from traffic aisles, and some additional protections for pedestrians, since you are intending for this to be a walkable district. And then there was previously a standard that the service window cannot be permitted to operate anytime after normal business hours, which were defined as 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pretty restrictive. We're suggesting that you move that 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. to at least accommodate some of those, morning food service businesses that may want to move into the village.
Coffee, or I think it was Phil
Ruggieri.
Ruggieri was doing the one up the road here. Did we ever do anything with the times on that? I know there was discussion on the times.
to the 8 to 8, didn't
They agreed at the time, yeah.
To 8 to 8,
I'll be back.
yeah. For a coffee shop, that's brutal.
Yeah, it is.
No, I like the 6 o'clock. I agree
Yeah.
with that.
Well,
People
what
on their
happens
way
if
to
you're a
work.
neighbor? And you're gonna hear that?
Well, there's screening and buffer requirements
There are, yeah.
from those uses.
Yeah.
And you're close enough to Van Dyke already at that point, so I'm not saying it like that, but there are buffer requirements to that residential.
Fair enough.
And there's noise ordinance as well, that they'd have to adhere to so many decibels at the property line, I'm assuming as well, right? So,
Yeah, I wouldn't picture like a suburban suburban house in a sub or a farmhouse as the one that's going to be next to a drive-through in a
Got
village
it.
district.
Mm-hmm.
And
How about a-
drive-throughs are kept as special land uses, so those would come before the
How
planning
about a
commission.
cement plant? Right next to the
there's
drive-through.
residences across the path from there, right? I'm trying to
Ross?
think.
No.
I'm trying to think if there are or not.
What's that, Barry?
Across the trail from like where Ruggieri's place was.
The trail goes right behind.
But is there residential right on the other side?
On the other side of the trail is Glacier Club.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So there is some residential within,
But I think it's the
Couple,
golf course.
there's a pretty decent amount of
it's a
distance.
long way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
When you're down at West Road, you've got, obviously it's significantly closer, but as you are kind of, coming up to that intersection at campground, yeah, that distance.
In the drive-throughs are special land use, like you said,
Yeah.
anyway, so that's something that could be addressed on each individual site based on what is close to it.
Right, and those are already special land uses in the district. We haven't changed any of that, just
Right, I agree.
made it clear what they are subject to.
Sounds good.
Well, he was promoting like a Tim Horton or Dunkin' Donuts, and those are breakfast coffee places. 6 a.m. sounds pretty good.
Everybody's halfway to work by 8,
Yeah,
at least,
yeah, yeah.
or at work.
You open at 8, Abigail, and you're too
Well,
late?
it could, business could be open, the drive-through itself.
But you
know.
couldn't operate the drive-through
Correct.
until 8.
Yeah,
That's tough.
that's kind of tight. Most people don't want to get out of their cars. The sexists would say.
So the only other provision here that's new is because we're referring to the appearance standards for multifamily and non-residential, there's language there saying that the actual building entrance didn't have to be fronted on the street. We're just clarifying that that's the case unless you're in the B1 district, then you need to provide that entrance to the street, again, consistent with your guidelines. So not really a change, but just shoring up our language so we're not conflicting different sections. Any questions on the V1? Thoughts? Okay. Thank you. It's good discussion, and we'll bring it back. Yeah.
Just a quick one on that. I wanted to go back to page 7 on the, where they talk about the courtyards and patios and things like that.
Yes.
In the village district, how would, let's say I've got a building that I've developed where I've got 2 separate units, and there's a small courtyard or an alleyway that's covered between those. How would that count towards my frontage? I mean, it's a usable feature of the building. Would that be included in my frontage calculation? Because it's pretty tight in the village district. So would we be considering that as usable frontage on the building, or would that just count towards yards and?
For what standard are you thinking? Like,
For the 66% frontage on, you know, if we're looking at that and somebody wants to build a feature in where they're having an open space between, or maybe on the corner of a building where we're doing a cutout with an area that's usable. Are you following me?
I'm a little more visual, of a visual learner.
Okay.
So, yes,
Assume 2 buildings coming together at a corner. Now, I cut out that corner and make a courtyard. It's covered maybe, and I can have a little market there, a little farmer's market, or a little fountain, clock, open space for people to congregate. Is that going to be considered frontage? Because it's a usable feature of the building. It's sort of built in, but, you know, because we've got that 66% requirement.
Yeah, the building orientation requirement, principal building shall occupy a minimum of 2/3 of the entire parcel road frontage.
So
It would just be set back.
would we be giving them that calculation?
The building would still be behind the area that you're talking about, correct?
No, it could be completely open space all the way through.
Cut
Then
through.
then it wouldn't count.
It would not count. That's part of your
But I wouldn't
33.
say it's like giving it to them.
Well, let's assume then it's a covered area though, where the building roof extends over that area, but it's open through.
If it's structurally attached.
Then,
It's part of
Then
the building.
fronts at some point, the roof fronts, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that's what Newberry South did with that patio, that second floor
Yeah.
patio for the extension, yeah.
yeah, cantilevers and all sorts of things you can get into.
Are you afraid of that it would allow something that's not
Well, I'm not afraid.
building?
No, I was just wondering if, you know, because we are, you know, some of these lots are very tight on space, and when somebody comes in and they want to do a design, we've bumped up against that 2/3 requirement a few times. So I just wanted to make sure that we've got a thought on that.
That's probably why it's encouraged versus required to accommodate for the lot.
What section you reading from, Dana? What, for the 66?
That's that one, remember, in no such circumstance one that you love so much?
Yeah,
I did
under
like
no
it.
circumstances.
That was
We
your-
changed it.
That was your
Yeah.
favorite.
No, that's a good question.
I mean, it would be to the benefit of the community in the village district to have those type of areas, but, you know, would it be a penalty to the building developer if we're not going to allow them to count that as frontage where they may need that to meet our other ordinances?
I mean, yeah, I just think of like downtown Romeo, you have a couple spots where you cut between those buildings. They're not connected, they're like little alleyways that cut through. That would not be considered part of it. Now, if you are building a building with a cut through with the roof, say the second floor continues across, or you do a roofed over area to separate 2 buildings, it's ultimately one building. That still is one building
Yeah,
envelope.
if it's structurally,
I would
just like
say it's
accessory
not.
structures.
That's
which
one building.
Attached or detached building, you have to look
I
at
would
it that
say,
way.
yeah, that's attached, it's one building. If they do a cut through and don't want to utilize a 20-foot alley through the middle of it and want to put a couple benches in there for aesthetically.
And they
would
do,
have no
because most
objection
of the
to that.
parking's in behind the
Correct.
businesses.
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
It also depends on the business and what they're trying to achieve, right? Like, is it that it's an existing building and they're trying to activate more of the site, keeping
Yeah.
costs low, you know, for their business, versus is it a new development that's,
Or would the space have a defined function, you know, that was, yeah,
is it
necessary?
activated? We use
yeah.
an SR planner.
Activated?
For like, yeah, is it an activated public
Activated.
space, you know, or is it a bench that's
Yeah,
that has a planter in it versus part of a service patio or a entertainment space?
Yeah, I mean, could be an
And I would
egress
just add,
path.
this is why, like, the intent statements are really powerful too. Like, having that gives us some more justification when some of these things are unclear, or if, you know, if we're trying to figure out how we're gonna make the language work.
Alrighty.
Good question, John.
Is there a site in particular?
I have a site in mind, no, I can't. Actually, I did have a site in mind, I'll catch you after.
Awesome, thank you, guys. So the last one is, really, hopefully, it doesn't need a whole ton of discussion because none of the standards here have changed. We just moved a lot of things around. So this is the amendments to off-street parking standards draft. What was happening was that we found our parking standards scattered throughout the zoning ordinance in a lot of different zoning districts and special use standards. Just difficult for developers to find for one, or applicants when they're coming forward and putting their site plans together, and difficult for staff as well to make sure that we're catching everything and enforcing your ordinance correctly. So all of this strikeout, those things aren't going away, those standards aren't disappearing, they're just moving to your parking standards, which is section, if we can get to it, section 5.12, starting on page 5. So all this language is moved into that section. If you look, and this is a thick packet with not a lot of edits, so bear with us. If you go to page 9, this represents really the only changes to the actual language in this section. One is that multi-tenant commercial was moved into your parking table as a use. This is something that was getting missed a lot, and so developments would come forward and, you know, they would propose so much parking but not have realized that there was that requirement for multi-tenant. They would meet that threshold and be deficient in their parking. So we wanted to put that right in the parking table so it was clear to any applicants what they had to comply with. So this language was here, it's just moving that space up so it doesn't get missed at the bottom of your table. The other change here is with restaurants, fast food, and drive-ins. So this says, it did say drive-through shall provide a minimum of 8 waiting spaces. That conflicted with a previous standard in your ordinance, written standard that required only 6 waiting spaces. So we just changed it in the table to match your other language. So it's, yeah, it's consistent in those 2 places at 6 waiting spaces for drive-throughs.
And this section in particular, you know, I would say Dana has the ordinance memorized the most. There were a few times over the past year where I'm like, how did I swear I went to the parking section and I know
like a scavenger
that I
hunt.
saw it, and it wasn't there. And so I think having, you know, it's also when we're doing reviews and when applicants are comparing things to see like, oh yes, it's in our parking section. Ideally that they will read the parking section and see all of the requirements together.
Because they would look at the table and not look at everything after the table. And so this puts everything in the best spot, in the spot it should be in.
Have we eliminated the decrease in parking for restaurants in the village district?
The parking reduction that we used to allow for,
The up to 25% reduction is still in this draft.
but not for restaurants.
Oh, right, correct, sorry.
I think that has to be a special land use.
Yep,
That's
it's
what we
on
moved
page
it into.
11.
That's the issue, if the restaurant goes into, where Art and Jake's is, not picking on Art and Jake's, I'm just saying into a complex like that, and you originally didn't plan on it. We do have parking now where it's going to be like backup parking.
Banked.
Thank you, that's the term.
But that 25% reduction's only in the village district, nowhere else.
Correct.
So Art and Jake's example of a normal strip mall outside the village, there is no reduction allowed.
Correct.
And any parking reductions for restaurant uses require that special land use.
But even this shouldn't be a reduction. Well,
You don't like the 25%, do you? Neither do I.
well, the problem is, if you don't have parking, you don't have patrons.
Got it.
And if it's not convenient parking, say you have parking across the street, it just, I think, negatively impacts the business, the restaurant business.
But yet there's communities like, they take Royal Oak, you know, and there's a big struggle there for parking. And,
Look at them.
you know, I think we want to create a village district. You know, perhaps we approved some years ago to have the one parking lot by Brown, was it Brown Iron? Just south of that.
Yeah, we purchased that land.
And did a beautiful job over there. People didn't think it would be used, but it's being used. I just think it's part of the village district, you know? And I think it'd be hard to meet that requirement,
What requirement?
the parking requirement.
Yeah, you're right. Well, yes, it is.
You know, because you're limited space, you want to have walkable businesses, you know, the food industry would be part of that. You know, I would think, bars and restaurants.
Very, very true, but parking is like the most important thing to any business, and I know we're a village here and we want to walk, but there's a lot more cars out there than walkers.
We'll go to Romeo on a Saturday night and try to find a place to park.
Yeah, agreed.
You did.
Good point.
So, item 6 on page 11, non-residential uses village districts may be permitted 25% reduction. It says may be permitted a 25% reduction, which basically leaves that, I would assume, up to this commission to decide. And then it says parking reductions for restaurants have to have a special land use. So any reduction in parking has to come before the commission to be heard, and a decision would have to be made. It says may, it doesn't say, I mean, so we are not obligated to approve a 25% reduction if we see fit.
Dana, didn't we allow Brown Iron to reduce their parking?
They did receive a 25% reduction in parking.
Yeah, but didn't they state that if they had customers on the outside, they were gonna take those tables away from the customers on the inside? So the total number wasn't gonna change.
That was part of the discussion during the planning commission, but was not part of the motion that was made when that decision was made. It was discussed, yes.
Yeah.
Was not part of the motion.
I know we missed it.
How often has this 25% reduction come up in the past, you know, well, since you've been here? You know, is it?
We've had it a few times. I'm trying to think of one other than the restaurant that came forward for that reduction. We've had it come up during pre-planning with proposed uses. There was a dermatologist that was looking at how they could meet the requirements, and that was a potential, but then they had another issue, and they didn't end up proceeding with it, but it's not a common thing that is requested.
Well, in an area that's already tight with land disappearing, I don't know how we can consider anything up to 25%, maybe a couple percent. 25%, that's an obscene request, especially in the village.
Like I said, it has to come before this commission, and it's a decision to be made.
I hear you, Barry.
I mean, and it, like I said, that may gives us the leverage to do that. I'm not a huge fan of mays in ordinances, because I like black and white, but, it does give us that option.
Yes, it does.
The special land use obviously does. Do we look at, reductions as a whole, should they all be special? I don't know. Would that be a reasonable thing, to move any reductions in parking to a special land use? I mean, or do we leave it as is with the may? I mean, the may gives us that leverage.
What already?
I think if you started to see an increase in requests, and just because of requesting it doesn't mean you have to grant it either.
Right.
So
Thank God.
I think if you start to see, you know, an increase in requests for that, then you can, as a commission, decide how you want to handle it, but since that's not something you're experiencing, it might be good to leave it just as discretionary based on whatever the use is that's coming before you.
And, you know, I mean, everybody, you know, we always, obviously, we're looking to our neighbors to the north in Romeo. Part of the village district and part of the parking issue that you may have going down to the village, you end up parking on the side streets and walking, and it's part of that walkability and that you want in a village district. And I know that's the hard part here is some of these existing residential neighborhoods, they're not happy with everybody parking up and down their street. So that's a tough one. So now you're looking at the township as a whole, looking at more parking, adding more lots, adding more of this, and that's gonna take away from what you want in the village too. So it's a tough balance. I don't know.
But in this day and age, though, what type of businesses are gonna come into the village district? You know, other than a type of service business, you know, meaning food industry.
Boutiques.
Here's your
Yeah,
example.
but, I mean, the.
Peter, here's your example. Hampton House area. They had to come before the zoning board to ask for another row of parking. We granted it because the Macomb County Road Commission, in writing, sent us a letter approving that second row of parking. I don't think they would have went an inch farther with that project if they didn't get the parking. There's no question about it. So why is parking important? You've owned your own business. You know what parking means. Do we want to be Birmingham, where there is no parking? Do we want to be these communities where there's nothing to park in front, you gotta go around the back, like Royal Oak? Hey, we have the opportunity here to make those calls. And why the hell would we want to punish people who are gonna come here? And we want people to come in the village district. They're not all gonna walk, or in other areas of the township. Parking is so key. There's no other way to get around it. That's just the way it is. We don't have public transportation taking people up to these buildings. It's just the way it is. And there's no land in this village. It's almost all gone, unless somebody's buying up a row of houses.
My question is who's gonna come and develop it? That's all, that's my question.
Peter, the developers are quite creative and unique. And if they see $1, they're gonna be there. And they'll give a try. They'll throw whatever they can up against these walls to see if it sticks. Up to 25%. I'd like to drop it right out of there. I don't care about May.
Do you feel obligated when an applicant comes forward? Do you feel like you have to approve the reduction?
No,
No, in fact,
I don't.
we denied the one with the reduction.
And it's not that we haven't given reductions, Kayla. We've given reduction for like a couple percent. Like 2 or 3%, and a couple of, in the village. But when you get into 25%, or 20, or 15 in this village district, it's obscene. It's a no-go, as far as I'm concerned, as a planning
I mean,
commission.
I don't
So
mind-
it's the
I don't mind the fact
magnitude
that it
that-
says may. I mean, may gives you that leverage. They
I
come
agree.
with a
Right.
plan. And I think the word may helps us in that circumstance, but.
But do you want to drop the 25 to a lower number? Is that what you're thinking?
Oh,
So
I
then
like
they don't
that.
think they're, they can max
That they're
it
gonna
out?
get it, and that's the problem with the 25. You put a number on it, and they're gonna say, well, I'm only at 20.
You're right,
you know,
you're right.
Well, I think the problem with May also could be that by the time they've gotten to you, they've designed the whole site with an assumption.
Correct.
Now you come and go, you're crazy, we're not giving you that, and then it just
Right.
blows the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna go for it, Michael. You're right, they're gonna go.
I mean,
Oh,
or
it says
just
may.
if you wanna go to a reduction,
Well, what would it hurt if we didn't have it in there?
go to the
I mean,
special land use.
If they wanted
ZBA.
more parking, they could always come and ask for it.
Thank you. Go to the ZBA.
No, make it a special land use.
Yeah, if we dropped that 25 right out of there and they wanted more than was allowed, they could ask for a variance. Yeah, would we?
Like higher than 25? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
well, just in general, if we if we didn't have language that says we can, there's an option, would we be able to grant a variance to give somebody extra parking if they went before the ZBA?
The reduction in parking.
When you say
Yeah,
give
the
extra
reduction, not the
parking.
extra.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking backwards, but you know what I mean.
You know,
Kathy, you know what I mean.
Well, I wanted to make
Exactly,
sure
yeah.
that I was listening.
No, I saw your face, you were confused, and then I heard it after I said it. But yeah, if we didn't have that in there, I mean, they could always come and petition for a variance anyway.
So if you have a restaurant that comes in that's a fine dining restaurant, that doesn't have the turnover such as like the Brown Iron, I mean, they're not gonna need as much parking as Brown Iron, but the requirement's gonna be the same, you know?
Well, it's all
And then
based on
wouldn't that
square
give this commission the ability of making that judgment? And that's what I agree with Barry, you know, leave it in there and then let this commission decide.
Sure.
Because, you know, everything can't be painted with a broad brush.
Or, like I said, you move all those reductions to a special land use, it goes to a public hearing, the public around there has a chance to weigh in. I mean, especially in light of what we do have here. I mean, certain restaurants here overflow into the residential, and it puts it to a point where they end up complaining after the fact, and it's already too late.
Would moving it
So-
into a special land use create any issues?
But then it,
I have one suggestion. We could equip you guys with like a list of standards that you would consider if one of these reductions comes before you. And that gives you more of a justification for when you would consider it and not. And it also indicates to the applicant what they have to show so that they're not coming to you with that assumption that they're going to get the full 25% if they know they're not anywhere near meeting some of those criteria.
So when they come to you guys with review, you have a list of your 5 standards, and they have to have an answer for each of those 5 standards as to why they need that.
Right, and it might not be, right, like the variance standards are very rigid, but these might be other things that you could consider that a variance wouldn't. Like, this is an innovative business that maybe doesn't fit anywhere in our parking table. You know, those are the types of things you may be able to consider. So, just a thought.
You'd want to put those in the ordinance.
Yeah,
Those shouldn't be on some just separate.
no, it would
Those should
be
be-
like our use standards.
Yeah, they should
similar
be
to
in the
that.
text of the ordinance.
Michael, could I ask you a question?
I think that's reasonable.
Sure.
There's a guy over there that looks just like you. No, I have no knowledge of this as far as the building or what it takes or anything else, but, you know, we do have a parking lot there, right?
Who does?
We do.
The township,
Parking lot, right?
right behind,
It's a
surrounding us.
fairly good size footprint.
Sure.
Did we ever think, and I don't know what it would take a special assessment or what? What about going up like most of the other communities? You drive down into Rochester, they put one up on the corner of Main Street. The only one that hasn't done it yet is Romeo, because they don't have to. But if you look at most of the communities that have a parking problem, they go up. And I don't know how many more spaces that would
I think you'd
give us.
struggle to justify the costs associated
We
with
would?
anything other than surface lots.
Is there any
In this
grants?
area, just due to the
Yeah.
lack of density.
Is there any grants, anything out that allows you to do that?
After
No.
that, no.
And I
You'd
would
need multiple
assume-
story residential to really justify that.
Didn't this commission talk about acquiring more property, you know, for parking?
we have
Township
another.
board
lot.
has. Yeah, you have a very
So-
small lot to the north of here, but,
You know, and
but go look at the parking lot that the township constructed and tell me how many days that's more than 50% full.
Rare.
You still need more things here that people
Yeah.
need.
Without a doubt.
This is a real, like, tipping point kind of discussion where.
Agreed.
I live in a community where we just changed our mixed use, that now there is no parking requirements at all. Because there's tons of street parking and there are enough off-site lots where it's just, people are gonna figure it out. That's what eventually happens.
And in my view, if you want a village district, you have to entice businesses to come.
Absolutely.
In this day and age, brick and mortar retail stores are just going to the wayside. And the only thing you're gonna have are services, entertainment, would be my thought, and that would be restaurants and bars.
True.
Just my thought.
And it's tough, we compare like a Rochester, we compare a Romeo, or any of the Royal Oak, they're all curb and gutter systems. So that's part of it, is like the residential that's back behind, let's say, Nostalgia. That's, it's got the ditches on the side, or it doesn't have the curbs. to
Right.
keep
Yeah,
people
these are
parked
all, I
on the
mean,
road.
This
Then
is,
it- then
guys, I've been here for a lot of years now.
They
This is
park
the
on the
endless
curb.
discussion. You don't have 150-year-old housing stock that, or building
100%.
stock that.
And you never will.
Well, and the problem
And
with
we're
that
gonna be-
is, and
have to
what
grow.
the people will complain about is the people that pull in front of these people's homes
Or on my grass.
just pull into the grass and they trash the front yard. So it's a tough, it's a mix of what we're dealing with, trying to create, and what's already there, and the amount of money it would take to go curb and
Yeah.
gutter on that. Just not-
Those are, yeah. Barry, those of us who were on the board when Brown Iron came up, after that was all finished and everything, people were complaining because we we were parking, or people were parking all over the place. So it may have facilitated building that parking lot. I don't.
Sure.
And, yeah, we don't have to decide on this tonight either.
Oh, no, we're finishing this.
You want to hear some more? I got another opinion too.
No, I think, either, like you said, coming up with standards would be, I think, ideal.
Yeah, we can take that back over this next month and work with that and bring that forward for the
Good.
next meeting.
Most also have been discussed at pre-planning. Like, it's not like they got to the table for the first time ever, not with an assumption that they were getting 25% reduction. Like, it was discussed at pre-planning, it was discussed in conversations
little bus.
beforehand.
Good
They
point.
even saw the
trolley.
review beforehand, so.
Good point.
Sorry.
These are things that can.
Pre-planning.
That's very true.
All right. So parking standards, V1 parking standards were all moved into this section as well instead of in the village district. We will make sure that these documents align when we do bring it forward for public hearing so that the standards are consistent across. There's nothing that we miss. A few changes here, not really changes, just clarifications because we've already been, again, enforcing and understanding it this way. But this states that you cannot have parking in the front unless the planning commission allows it as a special land use approval because there's unique physical characteristics on the property. So again, just specifying this is not allowed. However, if we're going to allow it as a special land use because of unique conditions, then here's what's required. And that's when you have that brick screening wall requirement, the 3-foot-high decorative brick wall, and where you have the one-way maneuvering lane. So again, we don't want anyone to come in and automatically propose that. It's not allowed unless there's special conditions that necessitate it.
What page are you on?
This is page 11, sorry. Yep. About to move off of 11. All right. Let's see if there's anything else we needed to go over here. I think everything else was just language that was moved, again, into this off-street parking section, so you're not searching all over your ordinance for these things. Going through here. Okay, and then just one last note. So we brought over the parking and storage of recreation and commercial vehicles. That language has not changed yet. I do believe Dana sent something out to you, correct? Yes, just some notes.
all of them.
A sneak peek.
Sneak peek.
So, but nothing to think about there yet. We'll bring that up for discussion at a later meeting. There was already a lot on this agenda, so. Everything you see on pages 16 through 20, I believe, has all just been carried over without any change. All right. And that's it for the parking standards. And the last thing that I have for you guys is the proposed changes to your actual use table. So this table, if you're unfamiliar with it, it lives at the front of your zoning ordinance, so not in the chapters or sections. But it's a quick guide for applicants when they're first digging into your ordinance. And so we just made some quick changes to this so that it's consistent with the language that we brought forward today for discussion. And then there was one clarification that we wanted to make on drive-through facilities. So this was a little bit unclear because you had two different drive-through categories. So we just wanted to specify that if the use is associated with food or, any food or drink establishment, then it's subject to the second drive-through facilities category, which means it's a special land use in the GC and the V1. Before there was some confusion about that, and it looked like it wasn't permitted in the V1 district especially. So clarifying that, everything else just matches what we brought forward to you today. Questions on that?
Excellent.
This is nice. Some work went into this.
Yeah.
It's great for reference. Thank you.
This table already existed. We can't take credit for that, but.
Well, it's still great. I'm just.
We created it. Nicholas Webster created it, so I'll take credit. You're welcome.
Joy continues.
Thank you for bearing with me. I know that's a lot of ordinance language at once. But yeah, take the month and think about it, and we'll bring this forward in the next meeting as well.
Thank you.
You didn't even take a drink of water during all that, Kayla. I don't know how you.
Well, yes, I did, Bob.
Well, you did. Oh, all right, I missed it.
She's hydrated.
Okay. Well, very good. If we don't have any more discussion, I know there's a person up here who likes to make a certain motion on item 12.
You know what, before we do, I just, has the township reached out to the, I know the MAP has put something out, and obviously through the House bills and whatnot, and it basically is gonna render a lot of what we do useless. I mean, not useless, but with regard to the they're trying to allow multifamily and or duplexes as a right in single-family districts. And there's 2 or 3 House bills, I believe. You would probably, 4? Okay, 4 House bills. It's, if you get a chance, if you haven't, look them up. It's a mess.
So there's a, now, MAP was endorsing.
Yeah, they're endorsing it.
But then MTA and SEMCOG weren't. Like, they were,
There's also quite a few Cranes articles
Yeah.
now, too.
Yeah, it's being pushed, and if it goes into, I'll tell you, the people of our community would lose their minds for some of the stuff that they're trying to push out and make mandatory, and taking away local control over how their zoning would work.
Yeah, that's
Do
the
you
key.
have feedback on that? Is that,
I've written.
okay.
I've worked with my township supervisor's deputy, and we put out information on it. And, you're talking about sewer capacity issues. I'm sure, you've got districts that are fully built out, and now you're going to basically allow duplexes to go in or ancillary homes in the backyard of single-family. You could double your density.
That was part of the plan
It's a mess.
for the
Well,
last
not to
organization.
invoke fear,
That was in
though.
Washington.
Sad, huh?
Low cost housing.
Could we encourage some follow-up
areas, yeah.
review of the bills and invite folks, if
So
they
the
have an opinion to
supervisors of
share
these
about them,
villages and
to a
townships
future
and-
meeting?
I
Gotta all
think
get
Or-
together.
at this point, you need
start
to reach
to-
out to legislators,
starting to.
because it's already
Hope
on the
so.
table up there. And
Yeah.
I thought today it was up, wasn't today?
I don't know what date.
For the House or the Senate? I thought Senate put it through.
One of them put it through, and it's on the other's table.
Yeah.
So,
I would just, unless we're like actually reading the bills and the ordinance today, I don't want to
yeah, I know, I'm just
messaging that
saying it
invokes
might be
fear
something we need
about
to-
something.
we need to
Yeah.
look at, and if, obviously, as the planner in this community, it's something you need to work with
Yeah.
our politicians to reach out to the appropriate legislators in Lansing. Because from what I read, this is not a good thing.
Not a good
Not
thing.
for our community.
We've got, our congresswoman has gotten a promotion, so she's a little bit higher on the ladder. Might be something to talk to her about, or somebody here, start movement, because that's a plan. That's a plan.
I think I sent you over what me and our people were putting together to send to the MTA.
That was,
And
this is in regards, this was a couple months.
This was a few
back.
months back, but
Yeah.
now it's been moved forward a little bit. I don't
No,
believe so.
Dana said no.
I don't think the
No,
MTA does.
but MAP is, right?
The Michigan
Map is
Association
pushing
of
it.
Planning.
Yeah.
Look, their honorable intention with anything and all of this is, there's a housing shortage. We have to do whatever we can to create housing.
Yeah.
Well, if it means taking away local control from what we do here and other communities, they're gonna run into resistance,
Big time.
without question.
So I'm not sure if a decision will be finalized by the end of the year, but it's something we can definitely bring back for discussion.
Yeah.
A deeper dive into it, maybe at the next meeting.
Looks like
Because
Mike put mine
it's,
in
there's a
combat
lot of
uniform back on
language
it.
in there.
Correct.
And like Cassie
Can you
said,
fit?
for the general public and those listening, you don't want to create,
I'll go to
kind of
Arby's.
that fear of,
Right, I just
Of
want
what-
them to
but
be aware and they should
informed,
look into it.
yeah,
and
but
reach out to their
informed and-
legislators.
yeah, informed and come back with
Yeah,
Classic.
some more information on it, I think.
Another
would be
part of that
helpful.
legislation was to give the opportunity to put residential, like you were talking duplex or whatever, where land is already zoned commercial.
Yep.
That's another large component in this objective.
So it's a hodgepodge.
Yes.
They're
Go to
playing,
Houston and you'll see all kind of hodgepodge.
it's, what do
so
they
it's
call
just
it?
something to think about. I just wanted to bring it up, maybe not for
DIA,
discussion tonight,
diversity,
No.
inclusion.
we should
That's what
be
this
reaching out
is,
to
you
our
know.
legislators.
Was worth.
This is, to
be fair, though, you know, not to minimize it, but there's nothing the planning commission can do about it. But oftentimes what communities do is they'll take it to the board of trustees, and the board of trustees will adopt a resolution, and that resolution will be sent to Lansing. I mean, again, at the planning commission level, you don't have the authority to direct the planner or anybody else to write a letter to Lansing, because you're not the legislative body.
Right.
But I've seen in other instances where the legislative body will adopt a resolution, and you saw this, and it's going on right now in Lansing on Act 233 for solar. You see the communities banding together, and they're all adopting resolutions, and they're loading it up in Lansing, and they've got, you know, the MTAs against it and all these other things. But that's the way to do it, is to have the Township Board of Trustees take some sort of formal policy statement that they're against this legislation, and then have that sent to Lansing in some sort of a formal resolution. Has your board done that, Fred? Is your board, has Clinton done that?
Well, yes.
Oh, your Township Board has adopted a resolution.
Oh, I don't know that they have. I know, we just had a changeover in political.
No,
leadership
yeah,
there,
everybody
so
has,
I'm not
right,
sure where
right.
that'll go. But it's been discussed.
Because, I mean, that, there's a greater impact in Lansing than getting a resolution from a board of trustees at a community, or where you band together, where you get other communities in Macomb County that said, look, we have 17 municipalities in Macomb County that have all sent resolutions, and you've got some legislator sitting there on his or her desk, and you've got 17 resolution, that's a better pack.
Yeah, we put together a package and sent it to the MTA, I know that.
Okay. Well, the MTA is obviously going to bat for what they think are your best interests, but.
Interesting.
So, just.
Do our community planners get the drift over there?
Well, that's.
Where the planning
Again, that's
commission
not their
is?
call. It's ultimately.
Well, the
You do have John, right, representing you on the Board of Trustees as well, so.
We got a trustee over here.
We have one.
Yeah. Actually, if the information you guys put together, if you could forward that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Can do that.
Yeah, if it's something, you know, if it's something where we're losing local control, I think the board would want to take a close look at that.
Amen.
Sad.
Yep.
Amen.
Well, if this colorful discussion is over, Mr. Chair, I think I'd like to make a motion.
I'm going to second that emotion. All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. We're done.